at this point.
Of course.
We
Well,
good to
when
go?
you're ready.
Yep, great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ian McInnes. I am the Director of Admissions here at the University of North Carolina School of Law in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I have been here for 2 years now, but been in law school admissions for over 10 years. Actually a Floridian, so very familiar with UCF and the state of Florida. I grew up in Bradenton, Florida, went to the University of North Florida in Jacksonville for my undergraduate work. I was a financial service major, so received a Bachelor of Business Administration. And then I went to Valparaiso University in Indiana for law school. Graduated in 2012 from there and came back to Florida. Passed the bar the first time. I'm licensed in the state. Unfortunately, 2012 and 2013 were two of the worst years to graduate from law school when it came to job prospects. So I landed in law school admissions and have stuck with it because I like what I do and I like working with students. So I started my career at Florida Coastal School of Law in Jacksonville, which is no longer, as an admissions counselor. I was there for just a little over a year and then went to the University of Florida Levin College of Law, where I was the associate director of admissions for about 3.5 years. Then I went to Michigan State for 4 years as the director of admissions there. Left Michigan State in 2021 and took a little bit of a break from law school admissions. Did legal recruiting for a international consulting and recruitment firm, Korn Ferry, for about a year and decided about 6 months in that I wasn't in love with that job, and I didn't hate it. Just missed working with students, working in higher ed, and so landed here at the University of North Carolina. UNC Law, as far as admissions goes, right? Every year we bring in a class of anywhere from 180 to 190 students. Last fall, we brought in 181 students. The breakdown for in-state versus out-of-state was about 50-50 split. We had just shy of 50% for North Carolina residents. It was like 49.72%, and then 50.28% for out-of-state residents. Now, I will say when it comes to residency here, some of those numbers could be skewed because there could be someone who was born in North Carolina, grew up in North Carolina, went to undergrad in North Carolina, maybe took, right, a gap year of 1 or 2 years, and then have come back for law school. We would probably think of those individuals as residents of the state, but the state does not consider them a resident because they've been gone for more than a year. So that's where they then sometimes fall into the out-of-state population. Um, but we had a little over 2,600 total applications for the last cycle to get our 181 enrolling class. We made just shy of 400 total offers, so our acceptance rate sat right around 15% last year, and we've been sort of in that range for the past couple of years, 15 to 17%. Our medians for last year's incoming class were a 167 for the LSAT and a 385 for the undergrad GPA. The male-female ratio, we were pretty much almost evenly split there. We then also had 90 colleges and universities represented in the incoming class, 54 undergraduate majors, and 27 states, plus Washington, D.C., the UK, and South Korea. So that's sort of what our class looked like last year. I will tell you, and some of you might know this if you're in this cycle, we law school admissions, right, and law across the country, applications have been up about 20 to 25% this year compared to last year. Um, We at the University of North Carolina are seeing more of an increase in applicants this year. So we've been hovering anywhere from like 40-ish% to 45% up compared to last year. So it has definitely been a quicker start to our cycle than usual. Our application opens every cycle October 1st, and we have a May 1st deadline. Here's what I tell every applicant. Your goal when you're applying to any law school should be to try and put yourself in a position to have the strongest possible application you can across the board as early in the process as possible. A lot of schools, right, are on a rolling admissions basis. Typically, they know how many offers they have to make in order to get their incoming class. And so as offers start to go out, your probabilities of potentially getting an offer are starting to fall. So the longer you wait in the cycle, the more offers that are out there, the smaller your probabilities of potentially getting an offer. Um, December 31st, I always say that's sort of like a good general rule of thumb as far as a good time to try and have your applications in by. Now, again, every school is different. There are some schools that have early binding decision programs. We do not. But those, deadlines are typically are earlier than a lot of people have. We have a March 1st sort of priority deadline that does nothing other than, right, tells you the typical time of when we really start to slow down when it comes to offers and also potential scholarship dollars, right? The later we get in the cycle, the more scholarship dollars are out there, right? We do have a budget. We have to sort of stick to that budget. Um, and so it's possible if you're admitted later in the cycle that the scholarship dollars you're offered later in the cycle might be a little bit less than what you would have gotten if you would have been admitted earlier in the cycle, right? So all things to sort of contemplate. Again, we have that May 1st hard deadline. Not to say someone who's applied May 1st has never been admitted, but the likelihood and probabilities are very, very, very small, right? So just something to keep in mind is that timeline piece for us, and I would say for other schools, right? We expect you to be applying to other schools. We encourage you to apply to other schools. So, please, please, please just keep in mind that every school and what they require in their application is a little bit different. It might look similar, but I promise you there are differences. So it's important to read instructions. It's important to know what the schools you're applying to are looking for. And so that's just something to keep in mind as well. We require for our application 2 personal statements. Those are required. The prompts are pretty specific. We want you replying to those prompts or answering those prompts, but we still want to get to know you. We want to get we want your voice to come through, right? What I tell applicants all the time is, yes, numbers are important, but at the end of the day, numbers don't tell us who you are as a person. And we're trying to build a class of diverse applicants, diverse, backgrounds academically, professionally, lived experience-wise, right? Because that's how we think you learn best and gain the most from a legal education. I think education in general, that's how you learn best and gain the most information. And so the way we get to know you are through those personal statements. They are through your resume. For us, a resume can be more than 1 page. I know in undergrad, they like to push 1 page resumes a lot. But if you have that pertinent experience that fits on more than 1 page, I want to see it. I don't want you not explaining what you were doing in jobs as far as duties and responsibilities or organizations, right? That's how we get to know more about you and what you're involved in and what you're doing and what you're passionate about. The other thing is, and again, we'll jump into this in a little bit, but LORs, right? We require 2, we'll take up to 3. And then any necessary addenda. So if you answer yes to any character and fitness questions, we need an explanation for that. Sometimes we need documentation. It will tell you, right, in our application what exactly we're looking for there. And lastly, outside of those two required personal statements, we do have an optional third statement. That is your opportunity to discuss anything that you think needs context. So whether that's LSAT scores or GPA, or gaps in your resume, whatever that looks like, that optional third statement is where you have the opportunity to give us that context and give us more information about those potential holes, right, in your application. Um, Here at the University of North Carolina School of Law, we do not have what we would call, or what some schools might call, concentrations or certification programs or anything like that. We sort of follow a generalist approach where we offer a broad range of course offerings once you get into your second and third year, but also a broad range of extracurriculars, whether that be through one of our 11 in-house clinics, one of our over 125 approved externship sites. We have 12 centers and programs here at the law school, and I'll give a little more information about those in a second. We have 6 journals. So outside of traditional law review, we have 5 other journals that focus on varying areas. We have multiple moot court teams, trial team. So it really gives our students the opportunity, if they know what they're interested in coming into law school as far as the practice area, there are opportunities in those areas, right, that they can focus on. If they're not sure, they have plenty of opportunities to figure it out through coursework or through extracurriculars. Those centers and programs I talked about, those centers and programs are faculty run. They give students an opportunity sometimes to help as a research assistant, help with special events. They're bringing speakers to campus on a pretty regular basis. One program I'll just call out real quickly, we have a Supreme Court program here. That is a program where faculty, alumni, and students are working together to represent clients and write writs of cert to the United States Supreme Court, in the hopes of those writs of cert getting picked up and them going to do oral arguments in front of the United States Supreme Court. That happened in 2023, a case they were working on. It was a double jeopardy case, I believe out of Georgia, if I recall correctly. And their writ of cert got taken up by the United States Supreme Court. They went and argued in November of 23, and actually received a unanimous decision by the United States Supreme Court in favor of their client. So things like that are the opportunities that centers and programs give our students. I talked about clinics. I talked about sort of our 125 approved, over 125 approved externship sites. We do require students to have at least 6 credit hours of experiential learning credits in order to graduate. And so most of our students are getting those credits out of the way by either taking part in our clinics or taking part in an externship, an approved externship site. So externships basically are, right, you're getting that hands-on practical experience, whether it's working for a judge or corporation or state's attorney's office or nonprofits. But there's an academic component, so that's where you get that credit. Our 11 in-house clinics, they are on a lottery system. They all have prerequisite courses that you have to take in order to be in a clinic. So most of our students who are in clinics are third-year students. And how the lottery works is you fill out an application, you rank in order, right, your top choice, second, third, fourth. They throw all those applications into a hopper, if you will, and start pulling applications. If you get pulled first, right, you're going to get your first choice. If you're pulled 50th, if your first choice is full and your second choice is full, but your third choice is open, that's probably what you're going to be offered. They just found that to be the most equitable way to put students in clinics, so that's how they do them. Our student body, that's a little bit sort of about the academic side, right? Our student body in total is just shy of 600 total students. So we have roughly probably, I would say, anywhere from 550 to 575 total. We are a close-knit, collaborative community. There is no backstabbing, students trying to climb over each other to get ahead. Our students work closely together, not only amongst themselves, but amongst faculty and staff. So it is a good place to be. Most of our students would tell you that they chose UNC Law because of the community that's here, how welcoming it is and how collaborative it is. So great place to be. Job-wise, tons of programming going on by career development. On-campus interviews are big here. For the last 2 years, we've been ranked in the top 5 in the nation for long-term bar passage and JD Advantage jobs. So our students are getting jobs at very high rates. Our students are passing the bar at very high rates. Those pass rates typically, once you put all of our jurisdictions together where our students take the bar, we're typically hovering around the 93 to 95% first-time bar passage rate. So good bar passage, great job prospects. And upon graduation, most of our students end up in anywhere from 20 to 25 different states every year to work and practice. And so that is what is going on as far as the spread. Can everybody still hear me? I'm having video problems now.
We can hear you. It's
Okay.
just a little, the video got a little. Maybe try turning off your camera and then turning it back on.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Um, So anyways, 20 to 25 different states. We'll see if the video comes back on here. But 20 to 25 different states every year. Typically, anywhere from 50 to 55% of our grads are staying in North Carolina to work and practice. And the others are going out. DC, the top or the second jurisdiction where our grads end up. And then New York and Georgia have been flip-flopping between 3 and 4. I believe Florida was 5th in this past graduating class, so 2023. And that's what we have the most recent numbers for. And so that's where we are as far as those rates. So I think that's a pretty good overview offer here. And so then I guess I'm going to jump into LORs and talk a little bit about those, and then we'll sort of open it up for questions if that works for everybody.
Sounds good. Um, just from my perspective, the camera is
Um,
still
Still shaky.
a little, it's just not moving. Like there's just, it's lagged. Like there's just your face, but there's no like movement or anything.
Okay.
Is it working from your end? Can anyone else give me?
I'm not seeing myself.
Oh, okay.
I just see a black box right now. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's frozen also on my end.
all right. Well, I'll talk about LORs, if that works, and then we will take questions, and maybe in the meantime, the video will come back.
Sounds good.
All right. So when it comes to LORs, letters of recommendation, I said we require 2, we'll take up to 3. There are some schools that require more than that. There are some schools who maybe prefer academic over professional. When it comes to the University of North Carolina School of Law, my advice and what I tell our applicants to do is to get letters of recommendation from individuals who have firsthand knowledge of your work ethic and your work product and can give examples of those things. So if that is a professor because you have a really good working relationship with them, fantastic. If it's a graduate assistant or a teaching assistant because they know your work product better than that professor because they're working more closely one-on-one with you, fantastic. If it's somebody in a professional setting, great, right? What I want you, what I typically tell applicants to stay away from are character references because we expect everybody to have good character who's applying. and or stay away from what I would call celebrity letters, right? So if your best friend's dad is a judge, unless you've worked for that individual, I don't need that judge writing me a letter because what they're probably going to give me is a character reference, right? So that's what I would say when it comes to letters of recommendation. Think about individuals who have that firsthand working knowledge of your work product, and they can give examples of those things, and making sure, right, that you have that good relationship with them so they know that information and can write you the strongest letter possible. When it comes to asking for letters, right, what you want to do is give that individual enough time to be able to write the letter and get it submitted to the law school admissions council so that it fits into the time frame of when you want to be submitting your applications. I can't tell you how many applicants I talk to every cycle who will say something to the effect of, well, I've submitted everything, but I'm still waiting on a letter of recommendation, so my file's not complete yet. So I would start thinking, right, early before the fall semester, right, when applications start to open, of who you want to ask for those letters and start sort of reaching out to them and letting them know, hey, I'm going to be applying to law school. I was hoping that maybe you would write me a letter of recommendation. How much time do you think that you need in order to do that? And let them tell you how much time they need. Okay, video's back on. Great. So that's what I would say when it comes to that. Also, when you ask the individual, please ask them, are they willing to write you a strong positive letter? I hate that I have to throw positive in there, but in my time in this career, I have seen letters of recommendation that are trashing the individual who is applying. What is very disheartening is that a lot of times those are really good applications until I get to that letter. And now when I read that letter, I'm questioning the judgment of the applicant. I'm questioning, obviously, the judgment of the recommender. And so a lot of things are going through my mind. And so you just want to really make sure that you're staying away from asking someone who might not know you well enough, right, to write you that letter where it is going to talk about the work ethic and work product in a positive way. And so that's what, right, I think you should be doing. And the reason we don't, and again, there are some schools that might ask for academic letters, but the reason we don't require academic letters is because I don't want to put you into a box where you feel like you have to ask a professor who you might not know that well for a letter just to get a letter, right? Because what's probably going to happen is if they do write you a letter, it's going to be very vague as far as like, Johnny was in my class, they got an A, they, came to every class, they participated in class. That's not telling me that much, right? The better letters and what gives me more information is Johnny was in my class. We did extensive writing where there was critical thinking and research going on. They implemented the feedback that they were given into their finished product, right? To reach, right, this finished product that ended up getting an A, right? That's telling me more about who you are as a prospective law student than, right, oh, Johnny was in my class and he got an A and they showed up for class and those kinds of things. So again, don't feel like for us, you have to get an academic letter, but for the schools that do require the academic letter, you really need to be thinking about who do you have the best relationships with? And again, for me, is it a professor? Is it a TA? Is it a grad assistant? Who can speak to that work product and that work ethic in the best way possible to give you that strongest letter? And that's who you should be asking. So my recommendation, especially if you are right underclassmen, freshmen, sophomores, um, even juniors, right? Like if you don't already have good relationships with professors, go to their office hours, start talking to them, get to know them, right? Like, same thing with grad assistants and TAs. If you're in large lectures where you have small groups with grad assistants and TAs, right? Seek their feedback, ask them questions, get to know them and make yourself known to them so that when you do go and ask for a letter, they sort of have more of, yes, that sort of character reference and building of a relationship with you, but then can sort of interweave maybe some of that with the work ethic and the work product. It's totally fine if there's some character things interwoven with the work product and work ethic. It's just full on character references for me, right? I don't think they enhance a file as much as the work ethic and the work product and the examples of those things do. So those are some things I think you should be thinking about. Again, timing, I think, is a big thing. Once a semester starts, especially if you're asking TAs, grad assistants, or professors, right? They're busy. And so they're not going to be able to, a lot of times, sit down and overnight churn out a letter of recommendation for you just because you decided to ask them last minute for this letter and you want to submit your applications tomorrow. So really give them a good bit of time and let them tell you when they think or what they might need as far as the information from you in order to write the letter in the timeline that you're hoping to submit your application by. The other thing, like I said, for us, professional letters are welcomed and fantastic. So again, who do you have if you're working, right? Who has the best firsthand knowledge of your work ethic and work product? If, say, you're at a law firm and you're working with the managing partner and they have more, firsthand knowledge of your work ethic and product, ask them. If it's right, a paralegal or a legal assistant, because you're working more closely with them, ask them for the letter. Again, you want to think of who has that best firsthand knowledge of my work ethic and work product, and that's who you should be asking for those letters. So again, for us, it can come from a professional setting, it can come from academics. And it doesn't have to be sort of the head of the department or the professor. It's whoever has that firsthand knowledge of and the best firsthand knowledge of your work ethic and work product. So those would be my recommendations when it comes to letters of recommendation. Remember that you do not see the letters, right? You usually waive your rights to viewing that information. So your recommenders are sending their letters directly to LSAC. And those letters are then you are going in and saying, I want this letter from this professor and this letter from my boss and this other letter from this TA to be submitted with my CAS report, Credential Assembly Service report through LSAC with that CAS report. So it comes over to the law schools when I apply. So you actually get to choose what letters you want going to what schools. And that's good to know because, again, some schools are going to say, we require 3 letters, we'll take up to 4. So we only require 2, but we'll take up to 3. And so, again, sometimes you have to have more letters on file for certain schools, right? So that you can say, okay, I want these 4 going to this school because they require 4. I only want these 2 going to this school because they only require 2. So it's really imperative that you, again, read those instructions for each school you're applying to, figure out what they're looking for, and then plan accordingly when you're actually applying. The best way I could tell you, and what I tell applicants all the time to do, is set up a spreadsheet. The schools that you're applying to, right? And list them, and then have columns where, when does the application open? When is do they have preferred deadlines? What are they requiring when it comes to letters of recommendation? What do they require when it comes to a resume? 1 page, 2 pages, or more, right? What are their personal statement prompts and what are they looking for? All of these things to have in a spreadsheet so that things are a little bit more clear to you as you're going to apply and you have things set aside and you're submitting the correct documents with the correct application. Because not to say that it boots people out of the process, but when I'm reading a personal statement or I'm reading something and it says, well, Harvard is my number one choice. And I'm like, okay, but we're not Harvard, right? We're the University of North Carolina. So just you got to be very specific and intentional about the documents that you are submitting to each school, especially if you're calling out schools in certain personal statements, right? You want to be very careful about saving them correctly and attaching them correctly. So I think with that, I'm going to sort of turn it over for questions. There's not much more I think I can touch on when it comes to letters of recommendation. So I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much. That was definitely a lot of good insights, a lot of good information. And anyone, if you guys have any questions, feel free. At this point, you can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat and I can read it out loud for anyone if that's what you feel most comfortable with. It says, how long do the letters of recommendations have to be?
So there is no requirement of how long they have to be. I think what it comes down to is if the recommender gets their point across in, half of a page, okay. I mean, I've seen letters of recommendation that are sometimes 2-3 pages, and we're not talking double spaced, right? Those are recommenders that have a lot to say, and there's a lot of information about work product and examples of that work product and why they think those things translate into that individual being, a successful law student. So no requirements. Obviously, you you do want them to get their point across and you want to glean as much information from the recommender as possible. So, I also have seen letters of recommendation that are literally 3 or 4 sentences, probably not giving me much information, right? So again, that's why I think it's important to be intentional about who you're asking to write your letters, who has that most information, because that's usually what comes out in a letter and gives us, right, that good solid foundation of what you were doing as far as work product with them. Oh, personal statement question. So again, we have 2 required personal statements. Our prompts are pretty specific. The first prompt, and I'm going to paraphrase here, so this is not word for word what we're exactly looking for. It's on our website. You can go and read it. But our first required statement is, why law, and why do you believe that you're prepared for the ethical, professional, and time demands of the profession? So a little bit more than just the why law piece. And then our second one is, why UNC law, and what do you believe you are bringing to our community from your background, whether that's professional, educational, lived experiences, that's going to add to the class discussion and enhance the learning environment for the classroom, but also the community, right? So those are our 2. They're personal statements. They're called personal statements for a reason, right? There is no smoking gun of like, this is exactly what we're looking for. What we're looking for is you to answer those prompts in a way that is obviously answering the prompts, but your voice is coming through and we're getting to know you through how you answer those prompts. However you decide to do that is up to you. Both of those documents, each one can be up to 3 pages, double spaced. No less than 10-point font, please. Um, I have to upgrade my reading glasses every year because my eyes just keep getting worse. So no less than 10-point font. Again, up to 3 pages double spaced for each of those documents. But again, what you want to write about and how you answer those, that's totally up to you. All right.
We have a question here. It says, "Hi, would you say that the earlier you start studying for the LSAT, the better?" The person that commented says that they're currently a freshman in college, and if you would say that students who graduate earlier from undergrad are on the same playing field as applying to law school as like older undergrad applications.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things. Number one, yes, what I would say when it comes to LSAT preparation, right? Scores are good for 5 years. So if you're a freshman now and you decide, oh, I want to, take the test because I feel like I have the most time to prepare now, rather than like maybe you want to take the test during your sophomore year because you know that junior and senior year are going to be very heavy, right? So if that's the case, then yes, studying now and then taking it your sophomore year, your scores are still going to be good for 5 years after you take that test. What I typically and what most people are doing, right? On average, an applicant will study for the LSAT for about 3 to 4 months, right? How long they study during those 3 to 4 months, different for each individual. But my rule of thumb and what I usually advise is the goal when it comes to studying for the LSAT is to do as many practice problems and practice tests under timed conditions. If I had $1 for every applicant who told me if I only had a couple more minutes, they would have done better on the LSAT. Well, that unfortunately is the whole idea behind a standardized test and a timed standardized test, right? So do as many practice problems and practice tests under time conditions as you can do. I think, right, that's the best way to study for the LSAT. And there are plenty of test prep companies. There are plenty of, outside materials that you can get, online programs. Figure out what works best for you and your learning style, right? That's how I would say to attack, right, however you decide to study for the LSAT, while still doing as many practice problems and practice tests under time conditions as you can do. When it comes to being on a level playing field, I think the great thing equalizer about law school is that everybody, regardless, is on a level playing field. I will give you this for instance, right? UCF has a law program as far as a major. When I was at the University of Florida, obviously we had a lot of students, undergrads from UCF, who would start with us in our program. And those that were coming from the law program, not all of them, but I would have some of them say to me, well, I already took constitutional law, or I already took criminal law, or I already took, some of these classes that they were getting in their first year foundational courses. And so I'm not that worried about it. I think I've got a leg up on other people, blah, blah, blah. And I would have the conversation with them year in and year out that, it's not the same, it's going to be different. And it was almost like every time, oh no, I'm sure I'm fine. Time and time again, after that first semester of law school, they would come back to me and say, yeah, I was not right. Yes, maybe I had a little bit of an inclination as to what was going on, but I did not have a leg up like I thought I did compared to those who didn't come from a background like I did, right? So I think that's what's great about law school is everybody starts on a level playing field. If you're admitted to law school, then we believe that you are prepared for the rigors of our program and are going to be a good addition to our community. That's what we're looking for. So, our age range, for the past couple of years, well, the previous 2 years, it was 19. This incoming class, the youngest was 20. Our median age typically hovers around 23. So the range itself was 20 to 46 for our incoming class in the fall. Um, but we are seeing more and more younger students because so many of you are coming into undergrad with so many credits from either dual enrollment classes or AP courses where you're getting credit for classes. So a lot of students are graduating earlier and earlier because of that. And so it's not atypical now for us to see younger students. What we want to get from the application, though, still is right, a sense that we believe you're going to be successful in the rigors of the program and a good addition to our community. And what I always tell applicants all the time, there are those individuals who take a gap year or two before coming to law school who can't, and they're only doing that because they think that experience is going to look better to me, not because they want that experience. And what I tell them is, unless you can effectively communicate, right, what those experiences have done for you and how they've made you grown and ready for, right, that profession and law school now, then it's not going to do anything to enhance your file just by having that experience, right? Um, there are those individuals who come straight from undergrad who can effectively communicate what the experiences they've had up to that point have done for them and why they've made them ready for law school and the profession. And because of that, right, we're admitting them, right? So it's all about effective communication. Age really doesn't have that big of a play. Now, if we had a 14-year-old applying for law school, there probably would be some conversation about, right, whether or not the maturity level is there, are they ready, right, those kinds of things. But, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, that's something that, again, we're seeing more and more of. So it's all about effective communication. Any other questions?
Hi. Thank you for answering my question. From what you said, I have another question. You mentioned UCF's law program,
Yeah.
and I've been hearing mixed things that if you take a law major as an undergrad, it could actually like tarnish your application because it shows you've already studied law at a different college. Is that true? And do you
No.
have like any experience with that?
I would say that's not true. So here's what I tell anybody in undergrad. Pick a major that interests you. Don't pick a major because mom and dad said you should pick that major, right? Pick a major that interests you because typically what we see from that is higher grades, right? Because you're taking an active interest in the material that you're learning, which in turn, right, gives you typically higher grades on tests, on papers, anything that you're doing for that class. So if you are interested in law and you want to get that major, right, because that's where your interest and your passion lies, then do it. But don't do it because, again, you think it's going to look better to us at a law school. I think I mentioned at the beginning, we had 54 undergraduate majors represented in our incoming class in the fall. And that's not atypical. It usually hovers around that number. So there are individuals coming to law school who are music majors, who are math majors, who are engineering majors, who are business majors, right? You sort of run the gamut of majors. And again, that's why I think law school is such a great equalizer and everybody's on a level playing field, because they're all coming from different backgrounds and they're all learning the same information once they get to law school at the same time. It is like learning a new language. And so what your major is doesn't matter as long as it's something that you're passionate about and you want to do. So again, I wouldn't say what you've heard is correct. I would just say that you have to remember that a law major in undergrad is going to be way different than what you're going to get in law school.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Thank you so much, Ian, for
You're
all of
welcome.
this information. This was generally really good. Like not even just for law, but I feel like in general, having all of those like best practices for applications and all that. So,
Great.
and at this time, since we're getting close to wrapping up, I wanted to ask you, would you feel comfortable leaving your email if any students have any questions so
Yeah,
they can reach out to you?
of course.
I'll also take this time to just drop in a little post event survey that we have here at AAP, as well as our link tree for any future events.
Great. So I gave my email and my direct line in the office. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. That is what I'm here for.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Ian. So sorry we had technical difficulties at the beginning, but it was a good session.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad it went well. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties.
fine.
Always one of those things where you never know what's going to work and what's not going to.
Exactly.